Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening for our town hall meeting with the Golden Triangle Homeless Commission to talk about issues that we've been facing in the city for quite some time, dealing with those who have found themselves in an unfortunate situation with homelessness. One of the things that we've talked about earlier is that, good evening, y'all come on in, ladies. Is that people from all walks of life can find themselves in an unfortunate situation where they're dealing with a homeless situation with families and children. I want to start by thanking the members of the Golden Triangle Homeless Coalition Board who have been working tirelessly, and the volunteers that work with them to try to make sure that we are able to help our citizens in a very serious time of need. I think many times the average citizen doesn't realize just how many people that we have facing these situations. We have, on an ongoing basis, we have, during the summer and winter months, we have severe weather which can cause illness and even death in situations with folks who are unfortunately facing, not having a place to stay. So the Homeless Coalition for quite some time has been looking for an area within the city to have a small home community that is a program that has been very successful in other communities around the country, and also possibly having a permanent warming and cooling station for our citizens that find themselves homeless. So what we wanted to do is bring the Homeless Coalition together tonight to kind of update us on what y'all been doing for quite some time, working with the city to find a location to house what I've described, and kind of where we are today in some options that the city has been looking at. We have Kevin Stafford is here too, our city engineer, who has worked with the Homeless Coalition on some areas within the city where we could potentially have this set up, and is going to help kind of have that discussion when we get to that point. But in the beginning, I want to turn it over to the Reverend Sandra DePriest to kind of give us an overview of where the coalition is right now.
Thank you very much, Mayor Keith. We are so grateful to be working with Keith. I think even as his election campaign was progressing, he and I were talking about homelessness, and this has been something that we've been talking about a long time. I look out and I see our partners, the part of the coalition, through United Way, through Columbus Housing Authority, and St. Vincent de Paul, without which and whom we could not do what we do. We do this truly as a coalition of churches and community organizations that with whom we've worked since we were formed in, goodness gracious now,
10 years.
10 years we've been going. So it's hard to believe, but we were formed as an entity to provide temporary emergency shelter. We were doing it in a 3-stage process: hotels, apartments. We had 3 at one time. We are down to 1 apartment right now, where we help somebody stay for 1 to 3 months, even 6 months, as the need requires, to help them get on their feet. But we're looking at a long-term plan, which was our vision from the get-go, that we would have a homeless tiny home village. And if you've followed other communities and seen what they've been doing, it's a wonderful community undertaking with a lot of involvement, where we build tiny homes and allow people to stay in those homes until they become progressively independent. And that's the idea, to help them with getting jobs, because what we do, we're not going to make a difference if we continue just putting a Band-Aid on. So that's been what we want to do. Before we go any further, I do want to introduce our president. This is Susan Jones Garton, and our treasurer, a long time, John Davis. And I'm going to turn the program over to John immediately, but I do want to begin with a Bible verse that is God's promise to his people. And it's from Isaiah 32:11. My people will live in peaceful dwelling places, in secure homes, in undisturbed places of rest. So we've got a commission and a call from God, and we have a huge need. And the reason I'm starting with John, we want to talk about the money that we're spending every year. And our purpose today, from what the mayor and I have been talking about, and what Susan's been talking about and handles daily, is that that we have an increasing need, and that we cannot ignore. And so we don't want to let it go unnoticed. We care. We care about the people in our community. The city cares, and we want to work together to come up with an ongoing solution. So now let me turn it over to John Davis, who's going to talk about some of the money we've been spending.
Sandra asked me just to talk a little bit about, again, what we have been spending, and as we operate really with a budget of less than $40,000. It's a lot of just churches contributing, individuals contributing, and this year we've been lucky to have, thanks to Renee and United Way, some of the money that is funneled in through the state and some ARPA money and that sort of thing that's really helped us. What I did want to do is just sort of share with you a little bit of how this problem and this challenge and this opportunity has grown over the years. Part of our mission is, and I think probably everybody in this room, and certainly those of you with whom who work with people challenged like this, and we have certainly learned a lot in the last several years, but we need to be treating everybody with dignity and respect. And so part of that is, like with Loaves and Fishes in this town, they're getting a nice meal, and part of what we're trying to do, a warming shelter is great, but people, and some people who are homeless like being homeless. You may not know that, but some of them are okay being homeless. But what they want is about every 2 weeks, they need a break, And the best way we've come up with, as Sandra said, we've tried apartments, we've talked to different organizations, we looked at building a huge shelter, the cost of that, the maintenance of that. So we ended up with hotel rooms. And fortunately, we've had some responsive hoteliers who have worked with us. But let me just give you some numbers for about the last 6 years. 2017, we spent $1,775 for 45 room nights, put up 83 people. And I'll rattle through these quickly, but 2018, $2,900, 73 room nights, 140 people. 2019, $7,000, 150 room nights, 340 people. 2020, 13,288 nights, 610 people. We doubled almost from 19 to 20. 2021, $32,000 for 711 room nights for 1,500 people. That's a lot of people to be getting off the streets. And we're pretty tough when people call. These ladies answer the phone, and if you've got somebody someplace else to stay or whatever, but these are people who are just out on their luck, down on their luck, or have children. That's been our main concern. Primarily females, single females with children. And then this year, we don't have all the December numbers in yet, but we're running about $30,000 for about 650 room nights, and again, about 1,200 people. That's a lot of people in this town when Columbus is 22,000 people, so that's what we're looking at. And a hotel works out pretty well. They get a nice bed to sleep in, Loaves and Fishes, and we come up typically with a dinner for them, breakfast for them sometimes. We send them to Loaves and Fishes for lunch, a clean room, a clean bathroom, and oftentimes a change of clothes and that sort of thing, depending on what people need. And what's heartbreaking is they'll put on the new clothes and just leave the old clothes on the floor because they're so old and dirty and they don't want to get back in them. Now, yes, we have had some problems and some people have abused it, but again, you help the one so that you can. But anyway, that shows you a big picture going from $1,700 6 years ago to $30,000 right now just for hotel stays. So hence the need for a longer term solution. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And now I want to introduce our president, Susan Jones Garton. Susan handles our hotline also, and she'll tell you a little bit more about, you know, what she's doing and the needs and the plans.
Go behind the podium.
For the microphone.
Like she just said, I'm Susan Garton. I'm the president for the Homeless Coalition. Going back to financials, from January 2022 to July, around June, July of 2022, we did roughly anywhere from 23 to 24,000 in hotel stays. So that 33 from last year was just 6 or 7 months. That's not looking at the full thing. John still hasn't gotten the bill for the November, December months. I don't know what that's going to be because we did have that cold snap and I was utilizing 4 different hotels at one time because I had, perfect example, I had a woman with 3 children, got here from Florida. Her grandmother said she could stay. Okay, she got here, gave birth because she was pregnant, and then her grandmother kicked her and the children out. I can't put them on the street. So, of course, I had to put them there for a week until I could find other arrangements. But that's just one example of one that within a 2-week time, I've put 20 people in a hotel room. That's only 5 hotel rooms, and the rest of it's just multiple people in one room because the families are so large. We not only work with the direct public, but we work with emergency management. We work with CPS. We work with DHS. I work with Mississippi Regional, Columbus Housing Authority, Mississippi Regional in Yorkville. I work with the hospital. I work with the hospital in Oktibbeha County and Clay County. So it's not just Lowndes County. We're representing it in the whole Golden Triangle area, and to y'all, most of you just represent Lowndes. And that's the area that we need to focus in. But what's ended up happening, to them it makes complete sense. To us it really doesn't, but because other counties they got ARPA money as well as, Lowndes County, and they should be allocating those funds to help their citizens. But what's ended up happening is they're spending their funds in whatever way they need, and then Monroe County or whoever is just busing their people here and dropping them off. Their churches are literally loading up buses and just dropping them off in Lowndes County and says, Lowndes County will help you. And then they'll give them our number directly, and we can't help them. Our funds are literally just for Lowndes County. So that's just how it went from our growing numbers of 10,000, 8,000, 5,000, it varied, and then just all of this huge, inflation. And it's because the other counties, even Vernon, Alabama, Northport, they're sending them all here. Even though they have a shelter, I'm not sure if they're not assessing their needs or if they're not providing the needs after they assess it, but it's rough. There are nights where I don't sleep, and I have a newborn, so I'm used to that. But, if I'm not sleeping, I know they're not sleeping. This week I had 9 children. I had a woman with 9 children. I have another one, 6 children. What are they supposed to do when they have been paying rent and then they're illegally evicted? They have to go through the legal system before they can get housing or get their house back. And in the meantime, where do they go? So I know that when we had that cold snap, emergency management systems in Starkville kind of kicked in, and they opened their dome over there on Lynn Drive, and 0 people showed up. 0.
From our
0 people total.
Oh, I thought it was just 0 from Lowndes County.
0 people. They said that they waited and they waited and they waited. And what's ended up happening is because we're Golden Triangle, if we have a shelter open in another region that we're representing, we have to send them to that shelter. And like I said, what ends up happening is they have no way to get there. If they're homeless, chances are they don't have a vehicle also. So then we're stuck and we're having to make exceptions for every single person. So I'm scared that 6 or 7 month, inflation of, $25,000 is going to repeat itself if we can't get a better plan. Thank you.
Our reason for working and wanting to work with the city is that we would like to have a piece of property where we could build this tiny home village. And we've been working on this for 3 years about trying to locate a property. We've gone all the way. We've gone all the way through with using Mississippi State to lay out the entire plan, and then we had opposition in that community. So we moved to another community where we did the whole thing again. We redrew our plans and laid it all out, and it turned out we had opposition there as well. So we are circling back to a piece of property that Mayor Smith had originally offered us. That is a piece of property between the Columbus Humane Society and the fire station next door on Airline Road. And we're looking to acquire 2 acres. And what we would do in that piece of property is provide a main building where that would double, as the mayor said, as a heating and cooling shelter. It would also house our washers and dryers and an office and the apartment for our caretaker, who would be our representative on site at all times. And then we would then build out the community with, it's got a lot of plumbing and wiring already done there. It used to be operated, I think, as a trailer park. So that helps us a little bit, but we are going to have to build up the land to get it out of flood risk. And so we've gotten donors to help us prepare that land. We're talking to people, and we have contributions for 6 tiny homes. 1 is near completion, but we've continued to have to put them off on the delivery of that home. It's being constructed by Holt High School. Their shop program has got a grant to do that, and they've been building it. We've made some contributions for the heating and air conditioning unit and some of those things, but they're building that out for us. And so that is our goal. And our purpose of having a town hall meeting was to hear from you also, to hear what your thoughts are, ideas, creativity, support. We want your support. We don't want to fight a battle. That's, we don't have the legal resources or the desire to fight a battle. We want to be here as a community on the same page, moving forward, excited about what we're doing to make a difference in our community. So before I do that, I'm going to let Kevin Stafford come forward and talk a little bit about the place and the design.
Thank you. Joe, if you could put up on the screen, picture's worth 1,000 words, and y'all don't want to hear me get up here and try to describe it. Also over here in the corner, which you'll see up here in a second, is on this board as well if you want to see this afterwards. But how we got involved is actually we helped in the designing and layout of the fire station that was recently built. So we had a lot of local knowledge about that property, which is owned by the city. So it's in the floodplain, and pretty deep in the floodplain for that matter. And so and Joe, if you'll zoom all the way out first and then come back in, that'll help kind of paint the picture. When the fire station was built, just a little bit more, Joe, if you can come out just a hair more and show the whole property. To kind of tell you where this is, it's on Airline Road. Airline Road's to the north of the page, the top of the page here. On the south end, which Joe hadn't gotten there yet, but there's a railroad track to the south side. All that's again in the floodplain. If you've ever seen those railroad tracks, they're elevated a good bit. If you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, kind of that blank space, that's where we borrowed dirt in the floodplain. So when the fire station was built, we took that dirt, carried it up and built up the frontage on airline. So from a floodplain standpoint, we're mass balancing. And so that's how anything built in this area would have to be done. If y'all seen the Humane Society, the city owned that property. When the Humane Society came about, same thing they had to do. They had to take that dirt on site to build up their property. And so for anything they would do on this property, same thing would have to happen. Well, I get the phone call, Kevin, can you help us out to see if this is a viable property for this project? Sure. So we meet on site, and lo and behold, there's actually an old road out there. I remember growing up out there, the old BMX tracks were out there. Some of those old infrastructure facilities are there. There's also sewer on site already that runs right by this facility. So what you'll see now on the page, on the right side is the fire station, on the left side is the Humane Society. The gray road you kind of see running in the middle is the existing road that's there now. It's covered up, it's a lot of leaves and dirt and other things, but some of the curb and gutter is still there for that matter. Some of the road base is still there, very traversable by vehicle by all means. And then the homes, and so I asked, all right, I don't know a whole lot about what the coalition's trying to do, so tell me, what size are these houses? How do they lay out? Now, how do you service them? I mean, how do you need parking? How much parking do you need? Does it have to be ADA accessible and so forth? And so quickly, we just laid out a few things. And by the way, if y'all are curious, this is not a city-led initiative. We offered, being familiar with the site, to lay this out pro bono for the coalition to help them see if this is even a viable property. And so with that, what you'll see in blue are the residences, whether it's a family residence, single units, double units, and then you see some in the brown sidewalk and ADA ramps for ADA purposes to get up to the property. So if you can picture the properties and the housing is going to have to be built up higher, so you're going to have ramps to get up to it in this property since it is in the floodplain. And then also, of course, the roadway coming in, the parking spaces, all that will be below the floodplain, but by code that's allowable. The other thing you see in the front is the warming shelter. That there shows 3,450 square feet. There's no magic behind that. There has been discussion about, well, could a storm shelter be put there as well and it be dual purpose? There are funds out there through FEMA. You could build a storm shelter that could also couple as a warming and cooling shelter as well. So, so with that, there's a lot of options for that in the front as well. But basically, at the end of the day, it does fit on the property. As you can see, it's a tight fit, but it's appropriate for what they're proposing. And so, again, we've laid this out just for discussion purposes, and I'll be glad to answer questions, but not sure if I can or not. I may have to defer back to y'all, but nonetheless, that's what's there. And again, same difference over here as well. And then you can see on the south end of the property how much more property is still available. I will say, when this idea first came up, also, we did meet with the chief on site and rode the property and talked about the pros and cons and how it would impact their operation, because they do training on the south end of that property as well.
How many family units?
On that one, let's see, there's 2, 4, 6, you got, looks like 5 units overall. They're dual in this case, that's laid out. Obviously, it could be expanded, but this was just to show how it would fit layout wise.
The concept originally, these little tiny houses would be for 1 or 2 people. But with families, we would put 2 together, and that could handle a parent and 3 or 4 children. As Susan said, it's unbelievable the number of children people have or are saddled with that they are responsible for.
The only other thing I mentioned that's not on here, because the detail doesn't matter for this purpose, but we did go ahead and lay out the grading of all this to know that it will work, it is constructible, and I know that y'all have talked to some contractors already who are willing to move the dirt that's on site and to help get this out of the gates as well. So again, from a viability, feasibility standpoint, it is the potential there.
And we pretty much have, as Sandra said, one house is built, it's paid for. We've got, and the concept is with the folks building them, this Holt High School shop, as soon as they finish one, they can build another, and we do that. But we've got 6 committed donors for anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 per unit. So people are willing to help. But anyway, that would be an initial start for us.
This is not precise, because what we are talking about are some individual units, some family units, and we need, and for 1 out, is it 1 out of 5 needs to be handicap accessible?
Yes.
So we'll be laying it out with that in mind. We have to meet criteria, I think zoning criteria, about 75 square feet per person, I think was what we were originally told, who could occupy one of the units. So.
Do they just have kitchens, or
They'll have a fully functioning kitchen, fully functioning bathroom. We're kind of debating on doing a Murphy bed. That way it would allow to be, pulled down and then pulled back up, and it would be used as a table. And that way it would give a little bit more of a living space. But where the kitchen would be, you would have a bar running beside it. That way it would be your dining room and your desk area as well. So it's fully functioning just like a normal hotel room would be, but bigger.
No oven, microwave
Oh,
only.
yeah.
Microwave only, no dishwasher. We would have a sink, a cooking oven on the countertop, but not a fully functioning oven.
How long would somebody come to stay in this location?
We've spoke with Mississippi Home Association in Jackson. I had a meeting with them last year, and again, I'll go next week and meet with them again, just to confirm the agreement that we verbally made. But from my understanding, they will pay they will pay the deposits, and they will pay 1 month. And then if someone needs it further, they'll pay that. But we're not gonna charge them anything. So to answer your question, roughly 6 months.
The concept is progressively independent. They need to be working toward independence, toward job, toward being able to pay and save and do those sorts of things. And the warming shelter building would be utilized for classes. We wanted to have some computer banks in there for people for job search information, that kind of thing.
So what kind of staff are you gonna have? Because you're gonna need some people to help the social worker to help them make that transition. What kind of, are there funds for?
Me, because I do it already for the apartments.
For the what?
I do it already for our Homeless Coalition apartments, so it would just be a trickle down. I would do case management along with Rapid Rehousing or Mute, because they do have case managers as well. Mhm. And,
That would work, that are agreeable to work with y'all.
yes, and they would keep up with a financial standpoint, but part of the agreement that we made with them is we can't cherry pick who we would want in these apartments, because they are paying for it. They're gonna, vet the people, and I think that's a wonderful idea. They're a great organization, and I know they have more resources than we do. Mhm.
Okay.
Is there a method of transportation, like if they get a job or whatever, is there a way to
A lot of times they don't have.
No, they don't have transportation, but that's why we really, really like this area, is because everything you could walk to. There's multiple churches within, walking distance. There's jobs within walking distance, the Loaves and Fishes for food, Salvation Army for food. Everything's within walking distance along with employment. But that's part of being in this progressive environment, is because we're not charging you rent. Save your money, get a vehicle so you can, go back and forth to work. And when you get a vehicle, get that employment, then you'll be able to pay for deposits and things of that nature. So 6 months is a general idea, but if they needed to extend it further, we would have no problem with that, as long as we knew they were doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Somebody submitted a question online about how do you make sure that there's not drugs or illegal activity going on? Somebody submitted a question.
Part of Rapid Rehousing is they make sure, part of their vetting process is they make sure you have a clean drug test. And then they will, sporadically do it from time to time. But we're gonna have something in place in that contract also, that we can do surprise pop-up visits and, drug tests as well.
We have a whole intake process and vetting process initially before we put anybody up in a situation like that.
But Mute is gonna do it, that's what I was trying to get at. Mute is gonna do it, or y'all, who's gonna do the vetting that we're deciding someone?
Both of us, really.
Okay,
I'm not
so-
gonna suggest it
Okay.
unless I know that
Okay.
something that I'm very passionate about is, if you have an addiction, you've got to get that under control. So we really want you to get counseling services, and then we'll recommend you to Mute or Rapid Rehousing, whichever one picks it up first.
Okay.
But y'all will have somebody living on the site, correct?
Yes, we will have a project manager on site, and that makes sure that if there's something goes wrong with the actual physical structure, they're there. If something goes wrong hopefully, domestic violence or anything like that. And domestic violence doesn't just mean spouse to spouse. It could be anything. We'll have somebody there that will be there 24/7 as a security guard, housing manager, kind of make sure everything's going well. If it's not, then I show up, and that's never good.
We do have a track record in the sense that we've been utilizing 3 apartments and managing those for a number of years. So we're accustomed to having to do evictions when there's not cooperation. And, we hate to do that, but and fortunately we haven't had to do it a lot, but sometimes there are people who are not compliant, and we have to say, without your participation, you have to move on. And that has to happen sometimes, but we want to help those who want to become progressively independent. Yes.
You mentioned a contract. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Is that a contract between the people who are
Contract, it would be with them and us.
Okay.
And then also when they get picked up by Rapid Rehousing or Mute, and when I say Rapid Rehousing or Mute is kind of the umbrella, and then there's several Rapid Rehousings underneath them, but both of them they're 2 different entities, but they're still the same entity. They also have to sign a contract with them before doing after they've done the intake process, and that just says you definitely are homeless. You definitely, you're confirming what you have testified to us. So it would be 2 contracts initially.
Would the coalition consider any kind of mental health staff or mental health services provided to the people that are coming through the program? Considering the people that are coming through the program usually are experiencing severe trauma, PTSD, just from the experience that they have from the homelessness.
With my initial intake, before I would even suggest them to Rapid Rehousing for our dwellings, if they're typically coming from a domestic violence situation or anything like that, I would require them to get counseling either before or as they're in the shelter. Part of what Sandra had mentioned is we're progressively independent living. You can't progressively independently live if you still have trauma, because eventually it's going to catch up to you. So we would either make sure they did it before or while they're in there.
Or basically just make sure they're receiving services while they're in your program.
Yeah, and we would definitely make sure that they kept up with it. You can't just start something and then drop it, because you don't ever solve the problem. So yes, we would definitely keep up with that. We have been working with Dr. Bliss with the W, who's part of the psychology department, and she definitely would like to pair with us and help us vet people better to see if there's issues that we're not quite seeing, because we're not trained professionals in that region. So we definitely have a lot of support with the W, and they would help us with things like that.
And we work with community counseling a great deal as well.
What about furnishings? Will you furnish these as well?
Everything will be built in.
Built in.
Now, also, y'all have worked with Mr. Kenny too to make sure. Can you address any of that? Is there anything that you would want to talk about, Mr. Kenny, from these houses being up to code and that type of thing?
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, the houses we did talk to Miss Sandra, and they would need to be built up to code. Even after the mayor and city council approved the homeless coalition to locate on the city property, it would still require planning commission and council approval.
So the houses would have to be built in a way where they were safe and maintainable and that type of thing. Chief Hughes, could you address a little bit what Kevin mentioned earlier? Because some of the area behind where this would be close to is also training area and stuff for the fire department. And you looked at, if this were approved as a location, and that's an if, this hasn't come before the council at this point, how it would fit in back there with what y'all were doing, and kind of what we talked about when we were out there.
Good evening. Yes, Mr. Mayor. We do use the area directly behind excuse me, the fire station for overland search and rescue training. We also have that area immediately behind the station sectioned off for a future training ground that we intend to build. But that in no way, shape, or form would interfere with what the operation that you have there. Other than that, I can't think of any other interference that may come about with the tiny homes being built there.
If you go back there and look at it, it's, you know, I was not aware of how much space is actually back there when I went out the first time and looked at it, and it really does seem to what they're looking at, and as Kevin mentioned, they volunteered to help lay that out. That was none of this is at city expense. It seems to fit in quite well there from a distance from where the Humane Society is, and also where the fire department is. One of the things that crossed my mind when we were looking at it, there could be even possible volunteer opportunities with the animals that are there. You know, there's a lot of programs out there when people are suffering from depression or anxiety. There are programs where they do pet therapy and that type of thing. With the fire department being right there close to it, that's that kind of security idea of it too, the interaction there. One of the things that Reverend DePriest was mentioning earlier in some of the other locations that we were looking at within the city, when y'all been doing it for over 3 years now, trying to find a location, most of the locations had been close to neighborhoods where there was obviously some concerns about having something like this located near an established neighborhood. Many times that comes into play because, you know, people are concerned or don't understand what these little tiny villages can look like and how they will run. Those are all very fair questions. You know, many times when folks are in situations like this and they're working through the issues that they're having, there can be problems that would be caused if someone were to leave the location, or, I mean, there's always those kinds of things you have to take into consideration. So there has never been any, you know, people upset or misunderstood about the concerns about them going into the areas. What the city has been trying to do for quite some time, which is understandable, is find a location that could potentially help with this. The city as an entity is not allowed to offer our buildings and stuff for this. In the past, there have been votes where we have used the Boy Scout hut and a location out in Probst Park where we could loan those for cooling and warming stations. When we've done it at the Boy Scout hut, there's been issues sometimes with the farmer's market there. And those are two buildings that the city is trying to, the two buildings that we've used in the past are buildings that we're trying to repurpose for other activities within the center. And our city attorney always reminds us that by state law, we cannot give facilities over for this. We can find ways to partner on short term and take votes from the council to do it. But there is a true need in this community to have a sustainable location that these organizations can depend on and our citizens can. So this is really a wonderful opportunity for our citizens and donors and volunteers to come together to have, you know, real meaningful discussion about where this location, is this location going to work, and how it's going to impact what the services that they're trying to provide. So there may be some folks, and I see faces out here that I know have been a part of helping, coordinating from the city with the groups, with the different groups like the Homeless Coalition. Are there any questions or comments of things that y'all have seen that y'all think you can add to the discussion today that would be good for all of us to hear? And if you would, I want to remind Joe is the voice monitor over there. I'm going to ask people, I know you don't want to, but if you'll come up here so that people can hear. And we're also recording this so people can go back and watch it on Facebook later on the city page.
Well, I just thank you, Mayor, for allowing this meeting to happen, because it really needed to happen. And I thank the Homeless Coalition for you all, for your dedication and for your support. My name is Julia Chavez with Saving Grace Mission, and I don't know how many times I've called Susan, hey, we need this person, and this person is in a crisis situation. They have these kids, and it's just last minute situations. And It's definitely needed in our community, and it's been a long time coming, a long time, we really need it, desperately need it. Last year, I want to say at the beginning of last year, when the apartment complex burned, you had the warming shelter open. They didn't have anywhere to go. Red Cross had nowhere to go to do the paperwork for the families. They found a safe haven there at the warming shelter to be able to come and bring those families there and to be able to fill out those applications or whatever paperwork they needed. The families found shelter there at the warming shelter. It was an emergency situation. Where would they have gone? You know, where were they going to be able to do that? You know, and I mean, it's just situations like that. We can go on and on. There's just so many other things that go on behind the scenes as to, okay, finding employment, finding resources after resources. You know, we all have to work together. You know, they need clothing, whatever it is that I can do, Saving Grace Mission. You know, I'm here to help you however I can. But I do highly recommend and I support this, you know, whatever you all are trying to achieve, whatever I can do to help, I support it. And I just hope that the council and the community sees the same. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things about the tiny houses is that Glenda and I were having a conversation when she was still working with us in the city is sometimes when people find themselves, like maybe they've ended up in jail for a while, and they're getting out and they're trying to get back on their feet again, they may be staying with a relative. Well, as these people are getting jobs, which you help many do it, and you could tell the story better than I can, but many times what people find is even if they're staying with a family member or a friend, that family member or friend may want them to pay rent while they're there, or if they're helping them go to their job. Well, and sometimes they find themselves in a much more stressful situation trying to do that from home if they don't have a place like this to go to where they can get back on their feet. And every situation is different. Everybody finds themselves in a different environment that they many times never thought they would have. This can happen to anybody. You know, a large percentage of our population live from paycheck to paycheck. One major illness in your family, a house burning or something like that, and if you are suffering from mental illness in some way, you can spiral and all of a sudden that's where you are. And so the fact that, you know, we can't overemphasize the need for this and the need for the community to be behind this in a nonprofit like this, spearheading it. Yeah, Glenda, please go.
Good evening. I'm Glenda with Building Bridges of Hope. And of course, I've worked with the homeless population for a long time, the Homeless Coalition, and pretty much every organization in the room. And one of the reasons why I'm in favor of it, community outreach, we just did a lot. Everybody came, we had an office, so everybody came to our door. And now that I've been gone, they've been still coming down to the complex because I've gotten the calls. And so,
She's been gracious to continue to help us even though she's left us.
Yeah, people still need the help.
Abandoned you.
I did not abandon.
She did not.
Me.
Trust me, she has done this for many, many years. Yes, go ahead.
11 years, as a matter of fact, with the city. And I feel like this is a good idea because when you said when a shelter is open, sometimes people don't want to go. They have pride and they have dignity. And when you're in an open space like that, sometimes people just don't feel good about it. But if they're in their own individual homes and they are dealing with things, this way they'll have a chance to deal with them and everybody's not seeing what they're going through. Because sometimes people, they just don't want that. And as the mayor said, it could happen to any of us at any time. And so to preserve dignity, in my opinion, to give a person their own space, that's why it costs so much money to have them in hotel rooms. I mean, even since I've been gone, I've still been getting a lot of calls. And not just for hotels, but for lights. Because I never wanted any children to go home and their lights were out. It was always important to me that if a child got out of school, that they were going home and they had lights and they had water so they could be better for the next day. I've encountered families that were homeless and the children were at the hotels and they wouldn't go to school because they were ashamed for the bus to come pick them up at hotels. And so if this is a community where everybody's kind of dealing with the same thing, I think it will take some of the stigma away. So anything that we can do to help this come forward, I think that we all should be willing to do that. Because in my opinion, everybody need a home, everybody need a bed, they need their own space. The only thing I would say is that when we're doing this for them, it should be mandatory that they do something for us. That's like get out and find a job. We've had people that we put in hotels that just wouldn't leave. We'll put them in a shelter and they would want to go out and just walk around. So then you do have to say, well, hey, you know, we're trying to give you a hand up. This is not a handout. And so I just think when there's some accountability on both parts, then we can all be better for it.
Thank you, Brenda.
We had a question submitted for the police chief. Chief, how does homelessness impact criminal activity, and how does working to solve it help with that part?
Well, good evening, everyone. Before I answer that question, I really want to take my hat off and commend you. I've worked in other cities, and to see this coalition get together with a plan, it means a lot. You know, the city has a motto called the Friendly City, and I can see it because I've never seen a city that have a plan that they're trying, keyword, trying to push forward. Other cities just sit back and wait and complain and want other people to do things, so I commend you for that. Now, your question was, how do we do what now?
How does helping this homeless problem influence making the city safer in relation to crime?
Well, like I think the mayor said earlier, you have some people that are at the end. They have no help. They get desperate. If you've never been to a home where you have children begging just for a sandwich, if you've never been on a call where people have stolen out of the grocery store a can of tuna just because they're hungry, it starts a process. So I do agree with Ms. Glenda about the self-respect. Some people are just prideful. You know, they don't want nobody to know that they're dealing with the issue. So having their own individual space where they can lay their head down. You know, I know the fire chief can agree with me. We've gone to houses where you got kids don't even have a bed. You know, and the mother might be working 2 jobs trying to do the best she can. And like the mayor said earlier, all it takes is an illness, a layoff. And if COVID didn't teach us anything, some people lost their jobs with COVID. It can happen. And renters and landlords, they're not going to want to hear, well, I'm not working right now. You know, so it's so much that goes on with the homeless population. This gentleman said earlier about giving them, making sure that you understand that don't look down on them, because it could be any one of us. Any given day, it could be any one of us, and I commend you for that statement as well. We want to do our part with the police department. There are some that want help. There are some, and just being realistically, some that just don't want it. You know, they enjoy what they do. Some of these people that are homeless are highly intelligent. Some of them have master's and doctoral degrees, but for some odd reason, they enjoy being homeless. But if we can give some of these people a way to have some self-dignity about themselves, just to help them get on their feet, then we'd be surprised though how we could turn this thing around, especially from a criminal element.
I heard you mention that one high school. You were encouraging people not to ask questions. You mentioned that there was a high school that were building these homes. Have you reached out to our local high schools, our local VOTEC, to see if they might be willing?
We have not, but we have also had some contractors who've been talking with us about building the homes on site. So that may actually be more efficient if we get some of that going, and we could get some of our local high school to do it. But the reason this worked out was that this he's not so young anymore, who's the teacher at Holt High School, used to be my youth minister in the church I served in Tuscaloosa. So when he was talking about this grant on Facebook to build a tiny home, I said, "Where's that tiny home going?" And he said, that it needed to be donated. It could not be sold. And I said, we'll take it. And so that's how we ended up with the first one. And then we've had to pay a little bit to help do some things along the way, but it,
That just seems to be a great tie-in for our students. You
Wouldn't
know,
it be
the
great?
Lowndes County and the McKellar
It
VOTEC to
would
be
be
able to do that.
fabulous.
So if you need someone to kind of be a liaison on
let's
that,
do it.
I'll make
Let's
that
do it.
happen.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Thank you, Councilman Green.
We've had about 4 times the question's been asked. I don't know who would want to answer it, but what's the next step?
Getting the land secured would be the first step. You can't do anything without that foundation. And then, I guess the second step would be getting the tiny homes put in place. We've got to, we will of course make sure everything is good with the tiny homes, parking, family units, handicap accessible units, things of that nature. So those structural issues will be addressed, but as soon as we get the land, building it up, like I said, we would have to backfill.
The next step will obviously be working with the city council to get
Yeah.
approval for the area.
And the planning commission.
Right, and the planning commission, making sure that, you know, all these questions are answered and that every potential stone is unturned. And so the next step would be to get with the Homeless Coalition Board and the city council to begin discussing and the city attorney to determine, you know, how this could potentially take place. You know, the council is aware that this is a location that they are interested in. And so the next step was to kind of have some community input to, you know, to get support for this location, if it is the right location, and then, you know, move forward from there.
Any support you'd like to voice?
Absolutely.
I do have one question. I think,
My name is Marlene Spearden. I'm with Karen and I are with St. Vincent de Paul, and we've worked and talked, and we are connected with Loaves and Fishes. We're connected with just, you know, but we feel
What is the mission of the group you're connected with?
anything when somebody, we have an application process once a week, and then we actually go and visit in pairs. We visit the homes, but we also get the homeless. But if they are in the homes and they have the power out and things like that, we actually go and visit the people to make sure everything is on the uppity up. And our funds come directly from our parishioners. And they have been just fantastic. And we're constantly in the learning process. But my question, this whole thing just sounds so wonderful and so supportive. I know our group would be super supportive with whatever we can do to help. My question is I can see all the donations with the buildings and the land. I don't know how that, you know, the land and getting it all constructed. Once it's in place, I'm thinking we've got to have a few people employed to maintain it. Where are the funds going to be to maintain, and is this all by donations still? Or is there a budget that, you know, where we do employ whoever is going to look over everything and keep it secure and do all, you know, or is this all purely going to be by donations? Am I making sense with my question? Okay.
I do think, looking at other models, we can employ some of our residents to do some of the things we're doing, but we depend completely on donations, and as those donations grow, we can hire people, pay Susan more full-time, hire other full-time assistants. But I do think that's a goal, and even before we go to the next person, while we're talking about donations, if you would like to donate a tiny home or you would like to contribute, you can mail your check to the Golden Triangle Regional Homeless Coalition and designate it for the Tiny Home Village at P.O. Box 303, Columbus, Mississippi 39703. And you can designate it for that purpose. You could give it as a memorial. Lots of good ways to donate.
And partly, in response, Marlies, about 4 years ago, we applied and received a very nice grant of almost $70,000, which we never received because we had not been in business long enough, even though we received the grant. The administrator didn't think we had a long enough track record for that. So we have received about 5 or 6 grants over the last couple of years that are very small. Fort County has given us some for land. There've been several, as I mentioned, United Way earlier, but we certainly have someone working on grants. They've all been very small, but there are opportunities, we feel like, for big time grants once we can show what we're really doing.
I might add on that, also the $600, and I say that roughly, that's with deposit and first month's rent. Say they go for $500 a month, that's what MUTE is willing to pay us per unit. So there would be money coming in from renting the places, but like I said, we would not be charging them. Let's say that MUTE money runs out and we can't get that, they would still be living there. We're not going to kick anyone out, before that contract is up unless they have violated that lease, such as, drug usage, violence, things of that nature.
I did not want to be fussed at for asking my question back there in the back. That's why I stood. Hi, I'm Renee Sanders with United Way. And Chief, if you find a person that doesn't have a bed, we do have an agency that will build beds. So we do have agencies that will help with that. I'm 100% supportive of whatever you think of because we get the phone calls all the time with homeless situations, and not only my office, I'm sure your office gets it as well. And any phone call anybody they will call and tell the stories over and over again. I really thought, I'm 100% about this and supportive of Susan, Sandra, whatever you guys are needing, I'm 100% behind it. But I really thought I was coming to a meeting that was going to address an immediate need like right now. Like right now, you have people that are calling that are homeless. Right now, we have cold weather that's coming.
Yes.
Oh, I was just rushing it. I'm sorry.
No.
So that one thing that I noticed is that nobody has a clue of what to do. There's so inconsistencies of who to call. I called the police one time, and then the police said, I don't know who to call. Hold on, let me give you a number. I called 911. I didn't know who to call first. And then they said, here's another number that you can dial. And then that person wound up saying that you can call United Way. I was like, well, I am United Way. And so I thought it's just a circle. Nobody really knows what to do. If we just had a plan in place, it would really help the community knowing what calls to make, what time to make a call. No, don't call Susan in the middle of the night. But if you do have to call Susan in the middle of the night, what happens after that? Right. Then they call me, and then she calls you, and that's all that I'm seeing that's happening. Is that there's just no structure to it. And if we just had some type of plan, we need to call first. Let's call who, and then we do what, and then they go where. I wish we could get an answer for that tonight. That won't happen tonight. Here's my other question: if money were no option, like if money was no issue, the land was already awarded, how quickly could that happen?
Probably 60 days, start finish.
Depends on how fast you can build houses.
Yeah, I would think those would be pretty quick.
I do have a meeting which I will still hold the meeting because I made the meeting, but I do have a meeting with the MSU Professor Ford to talk about their architecture program helping us with the tiny homes as well. So they may not be able to donate financially, but they could at least give some of their graduate students to assist. So as far as labor, I don't see where that would be a problem either as far as volunteers.
And I will try to address your comment earlier about, what is the, who do you call, when do you call? I obviously get messages all the time about this. And Glenda was one of the ones that really helped me early on when I became mayor. I mean, I was, buying chicken and having it up here for people to pick up. And Glenda was saying, wait, no, this is, she knows everybody pretty much. And she was coordinating a lot of that. We have just hired her replacement. And not that anybody can replace her, but the next person to come in to do their job, which is an extremely important job within the city, to kind of help coordinate that. One of the things I was trying to do, especially when we had the cold snap, and you were coordinating with Jamie, our COO, on some of the information. I was trying to push that out on social media as much as I could with phone numbers and who to call. When I get a call about homelessness, I go to them. That's where I go. And that's probably would be the best route. But I also reach out to y'all, and that's a chief. And because I had somebody reach out to me recently after they lost their home, and we were reaching out to different people trying to tie in the connections. That's what we hope to do, continue to do with our community outreach, is to be a point person that can get people. But it's always hard. Even though we are in a society now where we've got more communication outlets than ever before, it is still hard to coordinate these things, and that's something we'll continue to try to fine tune.
Well, so I'm Julie Parker. I'm actually here as part of the Community Benefit Committee that Lieutenant Sanders is the president of. And we have been working collaboratively with many of these groups in the room tonight as well, too. We don't have the infrastructure that some of the other groups do, but we do work really hard and collaboratively with them. But just to tag what Renee said and what the mayor said as well, too, we were kind of drawn in most recently with a family who lost their home. Lots and lots of situations there that need to be addressed with children and health needs and those kind of things. So I agree with Renee, having some kind of structure of knowing like what entity you can get clothing from and what entity you can get some medical assistance supplies from, and those kind of things would be super helpful for all of the nonprofits that are called when those kind of needs happen. So that's one kind of one layer of my life. The other layer goes back to what you were saying, Susan. As a faculty member at Mississippi State, my daughter just graduated from Dr. Ford's program. So using students in ways that are not only innovative and helpful for you guys, but give them tremendous experience is a wonderful opportunity. And I would even offer my students up as well too, because we are family studies students, so we work with families all the time. So I think between the W and Mississippi State opportunities, there are lots of things that students can do that can add to increasing services and providing that for what you guys are going to be doing as well too. So those are just a couple of things from a community member and nonprofit, but then also from a professional perspective.
I'm going to add on that. I'm going to add on what you said. A lot of people come to us and say, well, I don't know, I've never heard of the Homeless Coalition. Well, some people would get offended by that, but I'm ecstatic that they've never heard of us, because that means they've never been homeless. That means that they've never had to struggle with putting food on the table for their 6 children. That means that they've never had to go and beg in a parking lot for someone to buy food for them or their spouse or their disabled mother. A lot of people don't even know our number until I reach out to them from a CBC, referral or a United Way referral. But our number is 662-549-2643. We have a Facebook. We have a website that's accessible through our Facebook. We're everywhere. And if you have not heard of us, good for you. I'm happy about that. But going back to what you said about your students, we had a professor, and his last name is Artunk, I believe, and he's landscape and architecture with Mississippi State. When we had been looking at property before, he went out and helped us do a layout, him and one of his grad students, and because of the work that he did with us, within 1 month. I actually got the little boy, because he was very young, very smart for his age. I got him a job with the Corps of Engineers in the Nashville office because he had moved from Mississippi to Nashville. So just helping us with things like that on a professional level, even as a student, you know, there are job opportunities for you out there.
And I would add too, if you've not seen some of the photographs, and I don't think y'all have any tonight, of some examples of other communities where these tiny houses have been built, they're really kind of cool little communities. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, creativity that goes into painting them, to landscaping the areas around it. I mean, it's not something that is an eyesore, or even though this will be tucked away, you won't really be able to see the houses from the road as you pass by. But these are really kind of cool communities, and you know, research tells us that when people are suffering from anxiety or depression, their environment plays a big part on them being able to pull themselves up out of it. So what I've seen of these, you know, the little communities that have been in other places, they're really kind of cool. I mean, it's almost like little shotgun houses with, you know, so, and again, getting students and stuff and people involved in volunteering to, I think it could be, just have a major impact on a lot of folks and give people an opportunity to help where they haven't had before.
While we're waiting here, I did go visit Austin, Texas's community last summer and have lots of photos. So if anyone would like to see those, I've got them on my phone. So
I'm really excited about this, and this whole forum is wonderful to support. Here's where I'm coming from. When this happens, we need continuity. And I would love to see like a once-a-month meeting of all these people and all these organizations that we provide this continuity and help each other. And you're talking about lists. I mean, I'm thinking about who do we contact for this and for that. I'm a spreadsheet person, and I have a spreadsheet at home. Every time you've got it. and because things come up. Things come up constantly, and we don't know where to go. And I'd like to see that cohesiveness, if we can possibly do like a once-a-month meeting and continue on to make all of this happen.
I think we've done that some in the past. It was coordinated. Was it coordinated by United Way or I'm not. I know. It was by Glenda. Glenda. Sorry, Glenda. All right. Well, that is a good thing, and I do think the more we do that, the more we know how to make those referrals. I do have a list that we put out at that time for who we help, who helps veterans, who helps, Parole to Pride, which, those coming out of jail, how do we help them get a job and find housing and those kinds of things, substance abuse issues, domestic violence issues, and mental health concerns. So we've done this. I do think it's important to some degree for people to stay in their lane and to do the things they do the best. Renee's really good about enforcing that, and I think that's really a good thing, because if we try to help with clothing and feeding on a general basis, we're not focusing on the housing and helping people progress. And so I do think that's an important thing, and I do think we need to engage the Red Cross to understand more fully what do they do in the situation of disaster relief.
And we did try to work with the Red Cross the Salvation Army for a warming station here. And the fire department was trying to help, making sure that the facility could be warm, that they have, but there was bureaucracy within that kept it from happening. And so that's why we didn't have a place here in the city. That's why they were going to Starkville and then to the hotels. So that's why, whether it's a grant that we could potentially get for shelters, because we do need more shelters in this community, that could serve as both a storm shelter, but then when it's not being used for that, as a warming shelter or a cooling station. There are a lot of programs and examples. When I was in Memphis, I volunteered quite a bit with the homeless groups there in the city, and there are several, because Memphis has a large homeless population. They have a nonprofit called Room in the Inn that coordinates with all the churches, where they have a church is a different night all through, they do it through the cold months and now in the summer months, and they refer to them as their guests. And all the folks that are participating in that go through a screening, and they're in a different church each night, where that church comes together and provides a meal and then a place for them to sleep that night. And I volunteered in some of that to see what was going on. And most of the guests, once they ate, they were so tired that they immediately wanted to go to their room or wherever they had set aside for them in the church to sleep that night. And so there are different churches that handle that, that coordinate, and there's a nonprofit that coordinates that. So that's a program that we've talked about maybe trying to implement here within the city, and it gets all the churches working together on stuff like that. When you were talking about staying in your lane, there's a place called Manna House in Memphis that is run by a group, and what it is set up for is for once or twice a week, any homeless person in the city can go there, and they're volunteers, and when they go there, they get a shower, they get socks, clothes, those things. If they need a haircut, there's somebody there with a haircut, there's somebody to help with medication and stuff like that, have hot coffee, and they're volunteers that, some of the times that I felt the best of the day is when I would volunteer a morning there and visit with their guests, and then leave and go on with the rest of my day. It really gives you a perspective on, and just that little time you spent with somebody, talking to them, and just giving somebody to listen to. So it is, there's niches that when you do stay in your lane, sometimes when you try to do too much, everything kind of falls apart. So that's a very good point about staying in your lane but coordinating on how you work together. And there are other programs that we could potentially, build upon that have been successful in organizations if we're meeting, like you suggested, once a month or so to talk about these different ideas. Because I'm telling you, there is a real need in this community for all those things.
Right. We have a list that's extensive that has but see, your list is here, my list is there. It's a perfect example. I'm sure, we should combine the list, and I'm sure many of the others of us have that. So coordinating is going to be really important. I'm concerned about that we're really talking about two things. One is this wonderful community, and we're so supportive of it, and we'll do anything we can to help you with that. But that's not going to get the hundreds of people that we get that are still not going to qualify for 6 houses, and so that we're going to have this ongoing thing. I'm very concerned about you and about the personnel, because the ongoing Red Roof Inn and all the running over there and doing all that, and we do some of that too. Well, I feel like that's another area where we need to coordinate and try to, because we used to do the homeless before we learned about y'all and we started working together. We were trying to do the best job we could. So I really think there are two programs here, and that's an awful lot for y'all's board to do that wonderful project. And then, there are people right now calling on your phone, trying to get a place in our phones. So we do need to coordinate both of these carefully with each other, because it'll be ongoing. And I'm concerned too about just the staffing, and y'all talked about that some, but there's going to have to be, to me, there's going to have to be some staffing to help these folks make that transition, and you can't do it all. You just, yeah, I know, but still, this is getting bigger and bigger,
And the more people
and
that
you've got
we
a
get,
child now, that's a whole different thing.
the more people we get, or the money that we get incoming from, like John said, the grants and things like that, we'll be able to employ people. But something that's, we can do casework, but we still want to give them just a little bit of space to let them grow on their own. It's part of learning how to be independent and how to make that progress on your own. When we have the Homeless Coalition apartments we've been doing for a few years, and with the exception with a few or a couple that have had mental illness, they've all gotten deposits paid, they've all gotten jobs, they've all bettered their life in some way, attended church, gotten an education. I have a young lady who we put in the apartment, and she got her nursing degree while she was in one of our apartments, and now she's moved to Vernon, Alabama, and works at a nursing home. So we want to have somebody there 24/7, and they'll be living in our tiny home community, one of the homes. But I do agree, we will have more people. The more money
Just
trickles
don't try to
in.
bite off more than you can chew.
Right, right.
That's really important.
Okay, you wanna wrap it up and say anything more about it?
Kevin?
Can you tell us about, somebody's gonna make that donation, about what kind of cost we're looking at for each home?
Well, the initial estimates before lumber increased was 6,000 per home. And then, when lumber prices went up, we knew the price will go up.
You said 6?
6. But we're not talking, we're talking about volunteer construction. We're not talking about having to pay labor. And even our own on-site building, the people, that labor is free labor. We're talking about contractors who are donating their time. Habitat would be great. I think their paperwork process is longer, but.
What type of utilities? Is it gas, electric, is it connection?
Electric is what we've done on our first one, and I think that makes more sense. I think it's probably wired for electric now.
And who would take care of the utilities?
We do, but Mute has agreed to do that.
Yeah.
And pay utilities.
I think and it was a year ago, so don't quote me on that one, but I believe they even agreed to do some insurance too for us for the first year. So something to help kickstart us, and then from there we would do it on our own.
Great job, y'all.
Well, it's a beginning. It's a beginning, and, you know, as you said, the next stage is the planning commission and the city council, and so we've got our work ahead, but we're so grateful for, you know, Kevin and Kenny and the work they've already done and to help us out.
Any other questions before we adjourn? Well, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all for.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good night, everybody.